showing you how to self-tan tricky areas. This includes areas like your hands, your feet, your elbows, and I will do another video in the future on how to self-tan your face because all those areas are a little bit tricky. They might come out super dark and then you feel like your tan isn't as even or it might not look as good. If you want to see a video on how to apply self-tanner, I will link that down below. I made one back in the spring and it goes over everything you would ever need to know about how to apply a self-tanner. I show you a demo, I talk about the product, and it's also a review of the Sun Goddess self-tanner. So if you want to see more about the self-tanner I'm going to be using, check out that video and also more in depth on how to apply it to your entire body. So the first thing I like to do is apply a thick body cream. This is the Burt's Bees Almond Milk Hands and Feet Cream. This works great for your hands and feet or your elbows, wherever you want to apply it. It's really thick and very moisturizing, so if you have really dry areas on your feet or your elbows, this is really going to work great at moisturizing them because any dry areas the self-tanner is going to stick to and really make it look dark and unnatural. Then I'm just putting socks on over top my feet to let that sit. That's really going to make it last longer and it's really going to hydrate your feet because it's going to hold in all that moisture. So I did this several hours before I was going to apply the self-tanner. If you're doing this right before you're putting it on though, you want to make sure that after you let it sit for a few minutes, you wash it off with soap and water. You don't want any of this thick cream on underneath the self-tanner because then it's not even going to develop. So just make sure you wash it off afterwards, or what I did, I just did this in the morning and then I self-tanned at night so it had time to really soak into my skin throughout the day. So I'm going to start off by putting on my gloves. And before you self-tan, you want to use like an exfoliating washcloth like this one. You can find these at Walmart. They might have them at Target, but I usually see them at Walmart. They have like this mesh that's very exfoliant, and then the back is just a regular washcloth. I guess you could use them for dishes or whatever, but they work really well on your body for exfoliating. I know in my last self-tanning video I showed a sponge, which that actually works pretty well too, but this one I find works a lot better for that, especially if you have an old self-tanner. You want to be sure to exfoliate that before you go on and put on another layer because then it's just going to cake up and it will look bad if it's layered with old self-tanner. So I already went and did that with my feet because I did have self-tanner on before, and it comes off really easily with this. It just totally removes the self-tanner. Getting a good self-tan is having bare skin with nothing on it. If you have extremely dry feet or dry hands or dry elbows, you do want to apply a lotion first that's just going to create a barrier, and that will help it to where it doesn't absorb as much, it doesn't soak in as much as the color. But if you have just normal skin or it's not very dry at all, mine's pretty much normal, I don't have to worry about it, I don't get any splotchiness really. You want to just experiment in different ways depending on how dry your skin is. So I'm just going to quickly show you how I do my feet. So I usually start off, I like to work in really small sections with this too, just so I know I'm applying it evenly. It kind of takes me a little bit longer, but I'm taking about this much. And I usually just start applying it like this. And I focus most of the color on the top of my foot, and then I just blend down whatever's left over on top of my toes. You don't need to go into detail and go between them and everything. I'm just taking a little bit more like that, and I'm going to apply this to the inside of my foot. I didn't used to do this, I didn't show as much of this in my last self-tanning video, but I found that it really stood out that my feet were much whiter than the rest of my body. I mean, that's pretty much normal too with any tan, but I just like it all to be tan so it's all even. And you want to avoid this part of your heel. That's the part that can get dry and cracked. The skin is very tough, so that's really going to absorb the product to where it's not going to look right, so just avoid that area. And I'm just going over my ankle like normal. Again, my ankles aren't really dry either. You also want to avoid like this area down here too. So then I just make sure I blend it right here. This is an area that will tend to get a lot darker than the rest of your body, so you just want to make sure there's no excess product on that area and it's all blended out. So then I would continue on with the rest of my legs. So for your knees, you pretty much want to just apply it like you would the rest of your body. I don't apply it directly to my knee. Again, I just blend out what is down here on my leg and also what's on my thigh. I just blend that over my knee, and I did exfoliate with the cloth really well. My knees tend to get dry right around this area. You can apply some lotion first to your knees. I find that that helps too. But then again, sometimes it makes it to where it's harder to blend because you can still feel that lotion underneath your skin. So just try both ways and see whichever way works best with you. The lotion is going to make that barrier so it's not going to absorb as much, but then again it can be sometimes hard to blend it out over top of the lotion. So I just prefer skipping the lotion altogether and just going over it normally, but I try to keep my knees from being too dry anyway, so I don't really have a problem with that. So now that my legs are done and my feet and everything, I like to just take a little washcloth like this, and you can wet it. Usually I'm by the sink, but for here I'm just using a spray bottle. I wet it just a little bit, but you don't want to get it too wet at all. That might even be a little bit too much. And then I just like to lightly go over my toes. I just kind of brush over it like this. I'm not really wiping away the product. I'm just kind of removing that excess on the top that might make it start to look dark. You can even go over the top of your ankle right here because that, like I said, gets a little bit dark. And then this area right here where shoes can rub, if you have any like blisters or there's any part where your shoe has rubbed right there and the skin is really thin, you just want to go over it like that a little bit because that will pick up. But usually I don't have too many problems, nothing that's extremely noticeable. I only do this if I feel like there might be extra product or it looks a little bit dark already on the toes. I just kind of brush over it like that. So just some little extra things you can do to prevent any dark spots from forming overnight. So now when it comes to self-tanning your elbows, I'm just gonna quickly show you how I do my arm, and then I'll show you how I just kind of go over my elbow without actually applying it to my elbow. So I'm just blending whatever is left over right here quickly over my elbow, but I'm not going to start it off right here because that's gonna put too much product there. So now I'm gonna do this part of my arm. And I try, if I've already applied it to my elbow, I try to avoid blending it upwards. That way too much doesn't get onto my elbow. So I try to bring it down to my wrist. Now the inside of your elbows is another tricky area. This part will definitely get like a white triangle if you sweat in your sleep or anything. If you sweat at all in any areas when the tanner still hasn't developed, it is going to come off because it is moisture, it is going to make it come off. But usually I don't have too much of a problem. I try to sleep with the air on so I don't like get any creases here because I usually sleep with my arms like this under my pillow. So I try not to do that if I have self-tanner on overnight. But if I do end up with that weird thing in the morning, I just go back over it with a little bit more self-tanner. End up with this weird V shape here once the tan starts to fade. But if you just buff over it with that cloth, it will go away right away and everything looks really blended together and it looks a lot better. I'm just gonna lightly go over my elbows like that, and that's just to kind of remove any of the extra that might be on there. Now if you do wake up and you end up with really dark elbows, just take that exfoliating washcloth or whatever sponge you use and just buff over it and it should remove it pretty well. So now for the tricky part, which is your hands, and this is always what I do last. I even do this after I do my face, so I don't want to have any tanner on my palms since I am going to be taking off my gloves to do my hands. So usually what I like to do is I start off by taking off my left glove. You might find that you get like a line right here where your glove stopped. You just want to take that rag and just kind of go over that. If you leave that line there, you might still be able to see it after the tanner has developed. So you just want to lightly go over it just so you can kind of, blend over it so it doesn't show. Or if it got like really dark on your wrist, anything like that. And then I always get it right here, so I just try to get that off too before it develops. And another thing, you want to make sure that you're not going to be doing anything to where you would be washing your hands before you go to bed. So you want to make sure you already brush your teeth and all that sort of stuff because you can't get your hands wet, you can't wash them at all, so make sure you're going to be going straight to bed. So what I do is I just take a pretty small amount, just about that much here, and then I just start blending it onto my palm. And then I just blend it down onto my wrist. The wrist can be another tricky area too, so you want to make sure you don't apply it directly to your wrist. I'm going to take just a little bit more to do this area here. So I just got a little more since there wasn't any left over, just a tiny bit. I'm just going to go over my fingers here. And you want to bend your fingers when you do this so you can get the creases of your knuckles. And then I just go like that in between my fingers. And you want to blend it really well right here so that doesn't get really dark. This knuckle right here always grabs the tanner. You can see it's already grabbing the bronzer, so I wet my rag just a little bit more than usual, and then I'm just gonna go over that and try not to totally remove it, but I do want to try to take off that darkness there because that always ends up really dark compared to the rest of my knuckles. I think it's just the most dry. Then another area you want to make sure you wipe off is just these knuckles here. You don't want to totally remove it, but just kind of dab off a little bit of it. And then if you don't want your wrist, the underside of your wrist to get too dark, just brush over that a little bit too. So then you might be wondering, well, how do you do your other hand? So I go ahead and take that off, and then again, clean up the wrist so there's not a harsh line there. All these little steps might seem a little bit tedious, but they're the little things that make a fake tan look flawless and look real. Okay. Then I just try to turn my glove back from being inside out, or when you take it off, just try not to turn it inside out. take one of my old gloves, or you could always get a new one as well. As long as I can get my hand in there a little bit. I'm just gonna use this to apply the tanner to my other hand. I don't wanna full on put on the same glove because it gets kind of like gross and stuff, and I don't wanna mess up the tan that I did on this hand. So I'm just gonna kind of slip it on my fingertips a little bit. And I'm gonna apply a little bit to here, just enough to where you can blend over your other hand. And then just apply it to this hand. So I slept with the tanner on overnight, and when I got up the next morning, my elbows and everything looked great. My hands looked really good. I don't have any weird splotchiness, and I will show you guys in the pictures. The only thing is I must have missed this area right here. It looks a little bit whiter, but this hand looks normal, so I just need to make sure next time that I cover that whole area. But I don't have any dark knuckles. I don't have any weird white lines on these knuckles. Everything looks really great. But one thing that you want to make sure that you remember to do is put lotion on the next day. That's with any self-tan. You want to do that all the time. I personally really like the Aveeno Daily Moisturizing Lotion, and that's just what I put on when I get out of the shower. With this self-tanner, you do have to wash it off the next morning. So you would wash it off with your normal body wash. Just try not to scrub too much, and that will take off all the bronzing layer. And then you would put on your lotion the next morning. Now for your hands, it is going to fade a lot faster because you are going to be washing your hands and stuff and using towels on them. It can wipe the tan off over time, so you'll probably have to reapply it to your hands. Personally, I don't really care if it starts to fade off if my hands are a little bit whiter than the rest. There's never like a harsh line though. I never noticed a huge difference, but I just make sure to really keep my hands moisturized as well as my feet too, so I try to put it on more than once a day just to make sure they don't get dry so it doesn't fade quicker. And I also try to make sure that right here I get that twice a day. I put that on at night and in the morning, just because that does get dry and it will start to get like a little patchy right there. So I like to make sure that that stays moisturized. So this is how my feet look afterwards. I know it's kind of weird like showing your feet, but I just wanted to show you they don't look splotchy, they don't look weird, they're not still white. It really took the tanner well with all the steps that I did. So that's it for my video on how to self-tan tricky areas. If you're interested in purchasing this self-tanner, I will have a link for it down below. If you use the promo code glam-me-up8, you'll get 10% off your order, so that's really great. And y'all know I love this self-tanner. I wouldn't be talking about it and using it if I didn't really like it. I've used it all through the summer, and it's August now, and I plan on still using it through the fall and the winter time so I don't get too pale. So don't forget to check out that video I mentioned where I show you how to apply self-tanner to your entire body. Like this video if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to comment and subscribe if you haven't already. I'll talk to y'all soon. Bye everyone.